Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic: get the inside scoop on our New Zealand nature explorer, presented by Nat Hab expedition leader Sam Kuperus. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Take it away, Sam.
Alrighty, good afternoon. Yeah, thanks for the introduction there, Robert. And this morning I had great plans to present this from my garden and have a webcam over the bird feeders and see if we would be able to introduce some of our native birds to you. But I've woken up to an inch of snow on the ground, so I'm staying inside in the warm, and I'll chat to you from here. And we are 2 weeks away from welcoming our first guests to New Zealand for the 24-25 season. So very excited that you'll be over here shortly. And I guess this snowfall is a welcome reminder of what the weather here can do. Today, I want to have a little bit more of a dive into the wildlife in New Zealand and our ecology. Last year, Judy, my fellow expedition leader, hosted one of these webinars where she went into the logistics. So I'll focus on some of the other aspects of New Zealand to give you a bit more of an introduction, but also a few logistics along the way. There's my little agenda for the day. I'll introduce our New Zealand expedition leaders, give you an overview of New Zealand, some anthropology, geology, ecology, and a bit of a chronological itinerary of what we're expecting to see around New Zealand on our adventures when you come over to visit us. A little update on some changes to visas in New Zealand, and finally some Q&A before we finish. And the photo there, these are some of our native birds. They're called tuis, T-U-I. And the little bit of yellow above their beak there is actually pollen out of the flax flowers that they've been getting on their faces as they suck out the nectar. Firstly, some introductions. So in New Zealand, we've got 3 expedition leaders, Judy, Shuka, and myself. A little bit there about Judy. She's does a lot of travel overseas and has a passion for history and nature of New Zealand. And in fact, she was just on a natural habitat tour herself in Africa on safaris. So fantastic to have her in the team. And we've got Shuka, originally from the Netherlands, and she grew up doing sailing and actually sails competitively in Wellington, and loves surfing and skiing when she's not out sailing, and lives in Riverton, which is a small town on the south coast of New Zealand that we visit on our tours. And myself, I grew up in New Zealand on the east coast in a place called Timaru. Did my university studies in Dunedin, where we start our tours from. I've been very fortunate to travel the world, including popping over to Colorado last year to meet the Natural Habitat team. I'd say passionate about photography, definitely a hobbyist photographer, and I've just picked up a new lens for my camera, so I'm looking forward to getting some use out of that and learning how to use it this season. And alongside working for Natural Habitat, I also do some work for the Department of Conservation here in New Zealand. And recently I've started teaching economics at the local resort college as well. A little bit about our culture. So New Zealand in general, the people are very relaxed and laid back. We love to joke and laugh. In fact, on our tours, I have to consciously be less laid back for our visitors. And that means if you come to me with a problem and I say, she'll be right, or no worries, or one of our other colloquial terms, please don't think you're not being taken seriously. It means I've heard and I understand. We're just very relaxed about things. And this relaxed nature likely comes from our Pacific influence. Pacific Islanders reached New Zealand about 1,000 years ago and settled here, becoming the Maori people. The culture values looking after the land and hosting guests, something that New Zealand is still immensely proud of. So thanks for coming to visit, those of you that are on your way, and letting us show you our little slice of paradise. New Zealanders also love sport, playing sport, especially anything we can beat the Australians at. Australians, if you don't know already, are kind of like our big brothers. And if we can't beat the Australians, we like to try and beat the French. Recently, they have had a history of beating us in important rugby games. But our history goes back to the 1980s, when the French were doing a lot of nuclear testing in the Pacific Islands, and New Zealanders didn't like that very much. So there was a lot of protesting with a flotilla of boats that was sent up into the islands, basically to get in the way and stop the testing. And in retaliation, the French sent Secret Service agents into Auckland, New Zealand, who attached explosives to a boat called the Rainbow Warrior and sunk it on its moorings in 1985. That same year, the New Zealand Prime Minister, David Lange, was at the Oxford Union debates discussing nuclear weapons with Jerry Falwell, who you might be familiar with. Jerry was poking fun of us and asked of David whether you were snuggling up to the bomb or living in the peaceful shadow of the bomb. New Zealand benefits, sir. And that's the question with which we charge you, and that's the question to which we would like an answer. And our Prime Minister, David Lange, responded, and I'm going to give it to you. If you'll hold your breath for just a moment, I can smell the uranium on it as you lean towards me. And with that, New Zealand became very nuclear free, and we've never looked back, although nuclear power is something we do need to start discussing as a country again soon in order to ensure we've got sufficient green energy in New Zealand. And you probably haven't heard of David Lange, but a few other famous New Zealanders you may have come across. Jonah Lomu was an All Black rugby legend. Jacinda Ardern was our former Prime Minister and now teaches at Harvard University. Sir Edmund Hillary was the first person to climb Mount Everest with Tenzing Norgay, and he was the first person to reach all three poles, with Mount Everest being one of those, the North and South Poles. Kate Shepherd led women's suffragette, earning New Zealand women the right to vote first in the world. Pop singer Lorde is from New Zealand. Peter Jackson, who directs Lord of the Rings, as well as Taika Waititi, who directed Thor Ragnarok, amongst a bunch of other films. A couple of actors, Russell Crowe and Sam Neill. And if you're into motorsport, John Britton, Bruce McLaren, Burt Munro, Scott Dixon, and Liam Lawson, who's hoping to get a seat in one of the Formula One teams next year. Basketballer Stephen Adams and golfer Lydia Ko. So hopefully, having heard those, you'll realize you have seen a couple of New Zealanders around on the TV at least. Into New Zealand's geology, and for millions of years, Aotearoa New Zealand was isolated, drifting away from our nearest Australian neighbours. At times, the continent of Zealandia was almost completely submerged under the ocean, until tectonic uplift between the oceanic and Asia-Pacific plates lifted it to its present position. As a result, the tops of mountains are often rapidly eroding sedimentary rock like greywacke, punctuated with granite features from volcanic events that have been eroded by glaciation through various recent ice ages. Sitting on the Ring of Fire, volcanoes are part of the landscape, from the most iconic-looking Mount Taranaki to Lake Taupo, that when it last erupted about 1800 years ago was written about in China and Europe, and after the eruption left behind New Zealand's largest lake in the middle of the North Island. Interesting thing about that volcano, we know what month this volcano erupted by the pollen and flowers that have been fossilized, but we don't know exactly what year it happened. New Zealand is a relatively modern landscape, still being uplifted and eroded, giving her such unique geography, including Milford Sound, which is an iconic part of our tour, and considered the 8th wonder of the world. It is one of 14 fjords carved out along the southwest of the east coast by glaciation and punctuated by erosion from the 30 feet of rain and snow received annually in that region. The weather not only chips away at the rock, but also fuels the thousands of waterfalls that can be seen on a wet day. Our private cruise through Milford is always a highlight and well worth the early start, usually leaving the hotel about 6 a.m. And speaking of 30 feet of rain, a little bit of the weather in New Zealand. I've got some temperature ranges on the screen, but New Zealand's weather is highly changeable. 4 seasons in one day is not just a song by New Zealand's rock band Crowded House. It is our reality. We definitely recommend dressing in layers, especially during October and November, and April, May, when the average temperature is around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's not uncommon to get snow, just as we've proven this morning. And this is an outdoor tour, and for example, when we go out late at night looking for kiwi in an exposed location, especially during the September and October tours, wind chill could be below 30 Fahrenheit and raining. Of course, if conditions are too uncomfortable, we'll look for ways to accommodate. But if you are determined to see our special kiwi birds in the wild, we all need to be ready for all potential weather situations. December and January and February are warmer, averaging around 70 Fahrenheit, but can get up to 90 Fahrenheit. It is important to be aware that New Zealand's sun can be incredibly harsh. Sunburn can occur in just 15 minutes, even on a cloudy day. Good sun protection is essential as the ozone hole is still repairing itself above New Zealand, making it particularly ferocious. Long sleeves are a great idea, not just for the sun, but also to keep the notorious namu namu, or sandflies, at bay when we reach the west coast. In the summer, I wear lightweight trousers and long sleeve shirts on about 3 to 4 days of our tour for this reason. A little bit about the ecology. So New Zealand's isolation has resulted in incredibly unique wildlife. Some 80% of plant life and 70% of animals are unique to New Zealand. Unfortunately, it has been affected by predators, which were first introduced by the Polynesian people, who became the Maori people arriving in New Zealand about 1,000 years ago, and then later by the Europeans and their various introductions. Because New Zealand was isolated prior to the evolution of animals, we have no land-based mammals except for some unique species of bat who prefer, like many of our birds, to feed from the forest floor. There are, of course, whales, dolphins, and seals who are not so bothered by our marine borders, and excitingly, these species are becoming more prevalent again, having been severely depleted by sealers and whalers in the 1830s. Birds were able to fly to New Zealand, while lizards and skinks, as well as the very unique tuatara, a reptile not part of the lizard family, somehow survived through ice ages and the sinking of New Zealand. Without mammals, these creatures evolved in their own unique ecosystem, where the apex predator was the largest bird that has ever flown, the Haast eagle. Camouflage and standing still, being nocturnal and nesting in tree cavities were all advantageous adaptations in New Zealand without mammals. Seeds and fruit were abundant on the forest floor. Birds foraging on the ground no longer needed to exert energy on flight, instead building up fat reserves and becoming flightless. Truly unique birds evolved, such as the kiwi, kakapo, takahe, and weka. They were safe on the forest floor as they were as safe on the forest floor as they were in the air and in the trees until the mammals arrived. Firstly introduced by the Polynesians were rats and dogs. Then the Europeans introduced possums, cats, more rats, stoats, weasels, ferrets, and even the humble hedgehog became a destructive predator in an ecology not designed to withstand its presence. These predators hunting from the land day and night from the ground, using scent and whiskers to hunt their prey, have left a trail of extinction that New Zealand is now trying to address through an ambitious goal, Predator-Free 2050, that you will learn about on your visit. While you are here, we hope to show you plants that date back 430 million years, Tuatara of the Stenodon family that survived while the other dinosaurs went extinct, long-finned eels that date back 80 million years with a breeding cycle we still don't understand, flightless birds and insects that survive being frozen for thousands of years. If it's the right time of year, we might find blue fungi, Interloma hoschetarai. That's in the photo on your slide there at the moment. And the weta next to it are the insects that can freeze for thousands of years. We might see 1,000-year-old trees, the world's tallest moss, Dorsonia superba, and world record trees with hundreds of species growing on them, amongst other wonders. My colleagues and I always look forward to introducing you to the fascinating and peculiar creatures that call New Zealand home. On day one, we do a pickup in town at 2 p.m. and head out to Larnax Castle. Just after 3 p.m., we head out to the Otago Peninsula looking for great albatross, genus Diomeda. This is the only mainland breeding colony for the northern royal albatross. Spending the majority of their lives at sea, they take off from the peninsula and won't return to land for 7 years when they return to breed. These magnificent creatures have a 10-foot wingspan with locking joints that enables them to travel 600 miles in a day without flapping their wings. While they are rare to spot on the first day, we get another opportunity to look for albatross off Stewart Island on our pelagic cruise. On the cruise, we often get up close with multiple species of the slightly smaller molymawk genus Thalassaceae, who are inquisitive of our boat, hoping for some fishing leftovers. Up close, we see the size of their gape and the magnificence of their double folding wings as they take off from the sea around us. On occasion, we are also lucky to spot the largest of the albatross, the wandering albatross, with a phenomenal wingspan of over 11 feet. Despite their size, binoculars definitely help to appreciate these wonders of the sky and will be important for looking for penguins and other wildlife throughout your New Zealand adventure. And in the picture there, we've got a wandering albatross in the top middle, and then those are white-capped albatross on the right of the molymawk family, and down the bottom left is a Buller's albatross. And I haven't got a picture of a Selvins on that page, but we're looking out for Selvins in Stewart Island also. And day one also sees us visit the Opera, the Otago Peninsula Ecological Restoration Alliance, where we seek out one of the world's rarest and most endangered penguins, the yellow-eyed penguin. Unique to New Zealand's waters, these are considered the second rarest penguin, with about 3,000 to 4,000 birds remaining in the world, and unfortunately they are struggling. In some areas, the population has decreased by more than 30% over 2 years. Predation, food supply and changing waters, fishing bycatch, as well as avian diphtheria, a virus so widespread and fatal that last summer the decision was made to remove all newborn chicks from their nest for treatment. They are taken to the Dunedin Wildlife Hospital before being rehabilitated at the Opera and released. Without this intervention, about 70% of the chicks would die. A bird on the brink of survival, it does make it difficult for us to see them on the wild. However, the Rehabilitation Centre offers a unique opportunity to get up close to the birds, particularly later in the season, as the facility fills up with recovering birds and those waiting to finish molting before release. These penguins do a catastrophic molt, so they cannot swim while they're going through that process. The yellow-eyed penguin is thought to be the oldest species of penguin surviving, and they are unique in that they are fiercely independent birds, preferring to be alone or with a partner only, unlike other penguins that nest in close colonies and raft up at sea before coming ashore. They also nest in the forest, under trees and in bushes for isolation and protection from the elements, as opposed to looking out for caves and hiding under rocks. Their Maori name is hoiho, meaning noise shelter. Opera has long been protected as penguin habitat, and in 2023 it was purchased by philanthropists with an interest in wildlife who have invested more in the protection of the landscape, including the removal of all farm animals off the property, replanting a native forest, and predator trapping, making it a great place for us to support in our quest to see penguins. We walk for about an hour, and there are up to 100 stairs depending on the route we take. On the early tours of the season, there are fewer birds in the rehab centre, but our sightings of Fiordland crested penguin in the wild more than make up for it. On the west coast, conditions permitting, on tours from October through to late November, local guide Jerry Sweeney takes us to a secret beach location where we see penguins coming ashore, often as close as 30 feet away from us. Tawaiki, or Fiordland crested penguin, are the world's third rarest penguin, with about 5,000 to 6,000 birds remaining. And while they don't have the same celebrity status as the yellow-eyed penguin, who is featured on New Zealand's $5 note, when we get to see them up close, climbing up and down the beach, preening themselves, they may very well become your favorite. We also have opportunity to see penguins on Stewart Island and in Milford Sound if we're lucky, including both these species and the little penguins. Penguins are special to New Zealand. 13 of the 18 species are found in New Zealand, including our Antarctic territories, although only these 3 species breed on the mainland. Penguins all evolved from an extinct bird, Waimanu, that was endemic to New Zealand. Waimanu is a Maori name meaning literally water bird, that lived about 60 million years ago and stood 3 to 4 feet tall. There are no guarantees of penguin sightings on our tour, but I can say I've seen at least 2 species of penguin on each of my tours, and as many as 5 species in the rehabilitation facility, which fills up particularly in the later part of the New Zealand summer. And on the slide there, you've got on the right-hand side, those are the Fiordland crested penguins, the two dirty looking ones and the one floating in the sea. Along the bottom in the middle, these are yellow-eyed penguins. The bottom left corner is a little penguin in a nesting box. And then the three chicks on the left with their young fluffy feathers there, those are also yellow-eyed penguins, yet to get their distinctive band around their heads. Day 2, and we head to Stewart Island, hoping to see kiwi in the wild. Weather permitting, we fly to Stewart Island in 9-seat planes. There is a luggage restriction for the flight, so that we ask that you use a smaller, soft-sided bag, maximum 33 pounds per person, leaving the rest of your luggage safely on the mainland with our driver. The airline is happy for 2 people to share a bag, but try to keep it under 40 pounds so it is not too heavy to lift and still soft-sided to fit in the confined luggage hold. We are on the island for 2 nights and will be out at night and on boats potentially in the rain. You'll definitely want cameras, binoculars and warm layers. A small carry-on bag is permitted for the flight that will sit on your knees. It is only a 20-minute flight and they are really good with luggage. I have no problem trusting them with my camera bag and laptop as checked luggage. Kiwi are of course nocturnal, so we wait until after dark to venture after them. The kiwi walk is not long and it is on a flat surface. We will walk 1 to 2 miles over up to 2 hours depending on conditions and bird sightings. In midsummer with long daylight hours, we may not get back to our accommodation until after midnight, but if we see the kiwi, it is totally worth it. These are one of evolution's remarkable creatures. Their closest relative is the elephant birds in Africa, and they are part of the ratite family. The same as our extinct moa. This means that kiwi or their ancestors must at some point have been able to fly and then lost this ability in New Zealand and became kiwi. More bizarrely, the extinct giant moa that once ruled the New Zealand forests standing 8 feet tall is also a ratite but not so closely related to the kiwi, meaning its ancestor arrived in New Zealand independently of the kiwi. Kiwi have so long ago stopped flying, it is almost unrecognizable as a bird at all. Their bones contain marrow. They have 2 ovaries, almost no wings, just a vestigial nub where they once were. And while most birds hop around listening for bugs and looking for berries, the kiwi's acute sense of smell is what it uses to detect grubs in grass. Seeing kiwi birds that are normally very solitary creatures interacting, whether at playful, territorial, or mating, is incredible. Running kiwi regularly lose their balance in an ungraceful tumble before righting themselves and carrying on like nothing happened. They have playful hops and jumps. They snuffle about looking for food, sometimes coming within a couple of feet of lucky audience and making bizarre sounds from adorable squeaks to Jurassic-sounding shrieks. When we are looking for kiwi, our guides use a red light to protect the bird's eyes and save from scaring them off. Unfortunately, this means we are taking low light photos, and shots will always have a red hue. Occasionally, you might get lucky and see a bird running around the town where we stay under the dim streetlights or in the dawn as they look for their supper, but this is rare. So we do get used to embracing the red low light. And I've got a little video here with some luck of a kiwi running around, and you'll probably pick up how hard it is to focus on them there. This night is also a good night to take in the starry southern hemisphere sky, including the Milky Way, and keep an eye out for the aurora. New Zealand is a long way from the South Pole, but weather and other conditions permitting, it is worth keeping an eye out. Keep in mind, we're about as far from the South Pole as Seattle or Minneapolis is from the North Pole. Uh, as a former Aurora tour guide in Norway, it is always something I am keen to photograph and hopefully see, but overall our chances are fairly slim. Many of the locations we visit are incredibly dark away from artificial light, so we won't be put off by cloudy skies in Stewart Island, as we will have opportunities for stargazing later in the trip. On day 3 is our pelagic cruise, where we look for marine birds, including the albatross and penguins already highlighted. Last season, we also benefited from the increasing population of New Zealand sea lions re-establishing themselves in the area. Territorial fights, lonely pups, and resting mother sea lions are becoming increasingly common sightings that may disrupt our plans, either positively as we spend more time watching them, or perhaps diverting us on our walk around Over Island to give them space. It has been many years since sea lions bred in this area, so seeing them is a great conservation success. Sea lions and seals were almost wiped out from the mainland by European sealers in the 1830s. While they are not back to their former numbers, we have been getting some fantastic interactions, and hopefully this will continue. Now we need to learn how to live with these giant pinnipeds again, which is proving interesting as the females come further inland looking for safe places to raise their pups away from the large, boisterous territorial males that can weigh 1,000 pounds. If you do sneak into the local pub on Stewart Island, you will hear conflicting opinions about the sea lions, as fishermen are often frustrated sharing their catch, tour guides are on edge looking after their guests, and even the toilets at the pub are not safe from the occasional inquisitive sea lion. While there are the occasional leopard seal and elephant seal sightings in New Zealand, it would be unlikely for us to see them on this tour, but never say never. And in the photos there, you've got 2 male sea lions in the bottom left corner. That's a female sea lion in the middle, and that is a New Zealand fur seal pup on the right-hand side. This day we also visit Over Island, a protected reserve island, looking for some of New Zealand's rarest birds and greatest conservation successes. These include the yellowhead with about 5,000 birds left. Oh, there we go. The yellowhead with about 5,000. The South Island saddleback, about 2,000 birds. Weka, there's about 60,000. Kaka, 10,000. As well as the very photogenic South Island robin. That's the bird on the bottom left of your screen. And New Zealand's smallest bird, the titipunamu, or rifleman, about the size of your thumb, and that's a rifleman on the bottom right of your screen. The South Island saddleback, which is the black and red bird you can see, was the first ever translocation of a species for conservation after rats reached the island reserve where they survived and wiped out Stewart Island snipe, Steed's bush wren, and the greater short-tailed bat. Just 36 of these saddlebacks were rescued and translocated to safe islands from which the 2,000 birds we now have originated. Over Island is also an introduction to New Zealand's native forest, where we'll look out for orchids, podocarp trees, ferns, mosses, and more. We walk around the well-made tracks for about 3 hours. The distance we walk will depend on the group and the sea lions. It is about spending time in the forest and seeing what birds come and say hello to us. On day 4, we travel back to the South Island in preparation for our Milford excursion early the next morning. In Tiano, we will make a stop to look for takahe and blue ducks at the Tiano aviary. These birds are here as part of advocacy, breeding, and rehabilitation, meaning they're not always present, especially the blue duck. Blue ducks are incredibly unique in that they live in white water their whole lives. They are specially adapted for this environment, including a rubber bumper around their bill to protect it as they scrape microorganisms from rocks and filter feed from the rivers. Blue duck populations have been struggling and are now starting to come back. They are an indicator species for the water quality, and thus it is great to see them progressing to a population of about 3,000. Takahe, which is the bird at the top and on the right of your screen, are one of New Zealand's great conservation success stories. Thought to be extinct for 50 years, they were rediscovered in 1948, with a population estimated at about 50 animals. Intensive conservation, including genetic mapping and breeding to protect these unique creatures, now has the population just over 500 birds. And the next conservation challenge is finding unique habitat to release them to. Takahe are related to the purple gnu, or Australian swamp hen, that flew over to New Zealand from Australia a couple of million years ago. These birds are of the rail family that are quick to adapt to a new environment, so when they reached New Zealand, they became fat and flightless. The Australian swamp hen landed in New Zealand again a few thousand years ago and evolved into another species, the pukeko, which has become one of the apex predators in New Zealand and one of the few species in New Zealand whose survival is not a concern. And I've actually found out that in March, I'm going to be doing some work with the Department of Conservation and at their breeding facility with the takahe. So I'm very excited for that. On day 5, we have an early start, aiming to leave the hotel just after 6 to get into Milford Sound for our cruise. Today is more about the landscape than wildlife, and getting to go on a private cruise before the crowds is an incredibly unique experience. It is a long driving day, and we will typically eat lunch on the go to get us to our accommodation as timely as possible. We also try to stop in Arrowtown, which is a historic gold mining town from the 1860s, on our way to Wanaka. The boat cruise is remarkably smooth, protected in the fjord by the towering cliffs on either side, overlapping entrance, and shallow bar created by the glacial moraine, which means that seasickness is not common on this boat trip. On day 6, we take the water taxi to Lake Wanaka, on Lake Wanaka to Moahu Island, where we hike up the hill, which is about 1.6 miles with 600 feet of elevation one way. Along the way, we are looking for buff weka with their chicks, and that's a weka chick on the bottom right corner, mountain stone weta, the insect that can freeze itself, and we're listening out for the chorus of New Zealand bellbirds and learn more about the forest and unique plants of New Zealand before a hot drink and cookie at the lake on top of a hill. Being careful that a cunning weka doesn't pinch a cookie from your hands, as this usually comes with a fright and an upended cup of tea. Or the New Zealand falcon doesn't swoop past in an aerial display at up to 120 miles per hour. We always leave the island better than we found it, planting a native tree to help reforest and feed the birds. In Wanaka, we are also looking out for the Australasian crested grebes. These birds have struggled with predation and climatic effects until retired scientist John Darby moved to the region and switched his focus from penguins to grebes. The result are floating man-made platforms that the birds can nest on, which has boosted their population incredibly and put conservation on the map in the area. Without these platforms, birds were nesting on boats and the lake shore, where predation and flooding was wiping out the nests. Now the birds are fighting over the best spots. These birds are so adapted to being in the water and swimming underwater, they are no longer able to walk on land with their legs pushed so far back on their bodies. They display elaborate courtship rituals that caught the eye of American TV host John Oliver when he heard about New Zealand's hosting a Bird of the Century competition. John became the ambassador for this bird during the vote, patriotically claiming there is nothing more American than meddling in another country's politics. Unsurprisingly, the crested grebe, or puteki teki, became Bird of the Century with more votes than had been submitted in the competition ever before, and thankfully more donations than ever before to forest and bird who conserve our native species. We also have some spare time in Wanaka that you might want to use to explore the town, photograph the grebes, hike up Mount Iron, or for some, an opportunity for some retail therapy. Then on the next day, day 7, we head to the Lake Moeraki Lodge, which is run by Dr. Jerry McSweeney and his wife Anne, and is a must for any nature lover in New Zealand. The Moeraki Lodge was built by Jerry and Anne in order to protect the forest of the west coast that was proposed to be logged and turned into farmland. The cost of clearing the land meant they only needed to make $1 profit for tourism to be a better option than farming, so they set out and established this lodge even before the road went through the west coast that we travel. They really are icons in the New Zealand conservation arena, and I promise you'll be gripped by their stories and information. If weather permits, we have another organised stargazing expedition when we go out looking for the New Zealand glowworm. Tiny larvae of a fungus gnat that glow a brilliant turquoise colour at night in a chemical reaction to attract prey. On day 8 of our tours in September through November, Jerry takes us to a secret beach location where Fiordland crested penguins run up and down the beach to their nests. These birds are only found here and further south. Tours later in the season will embark on a forest or beach walk led by Jerry, where he unravels the mystery of the forest with us. Along the way, we meet New Zealand's tallest tree, the kahikatea, at over 200 feet tall, a giant tree that was the inspiration for Avatar's home tree, and a tree that has the record for the most number of plant species growing on it. Also, we'll keep an eye out for Mesipterus, a plant that was formed over 430 million years ago and have one of the longest genome sequences of any living thing. And that's Jerry holding Mesipterus on the right-hand side. We will also listen out for the fernbird, an incredibly shy bird that Jerry insists lives in the area, but we are yet to see together. We may hear kia and kaka, we may see falcon as well as mosses and orchids. Jerry has a lifetime of knowledge. He loves our curiosity and passion and looks forward to hosting us and showing off what he has protected in a lifetime of conservation. The lodge backs onto a river and conservation land, and we aim to have some free time here for you to take some of the self-guided walks through the forest, down to the beach, or relax around the lodge and watch the river and birds flit by. There are also kayaks with an option to paddle the lake, looking out for black swans, pied shags, kingfisher, scorp, white heron, and to not see the fernbird. The Moeraki and Arthur's Pass lodges also have free laundry facilities, and we have time to use them. I pack with the intention of not needing to wash laundry until we arrive at this lodge on day 7 and have more free time on day 8. At the lodge, we also meet a dinosaur, New Zealand's freshwater eel, that dates back as long as 80 million years ago to the Cretaceous period when dinosaurs still roamed the earth. Hopefully it won't be me feeding them with the kitchen leftovers again. I'm happy to leave having these squirm between the feet of the local guides from the lodge. I'll also be happy not to see them on the lawn outside our rooms, as has happened in the past when heavy rains have raised the river level. Eels are quite happy outside the water for extended periods, but are of course completely harmless to us. On day 9, the dinosaurs get more real with our Tuatara encounter in Franz Josef under the mighty Southern Alp Mountains. Tuatara are the only survivors of the Sphenodon family and date back some 250 million years. Keep in mind the mass dinosaur extinction was about 60 million years ago. Truly unique creatures, they are reptiles but not lizards, living over 100 years old and taking 2 to 5 years to produce an egg. After they reach sexual maturity at about 20 years old, eggs then take 11 to 16 months to hatch. Strangely, 5 hatchlings were found in Invercargill after the habitat was closed and ready to be demolished. Often the young are cannibalized by the old, so the relocation of the older Tuatara may have been very good fortune. Tuatara is a Maori word meaning spiky back. They are born with a third eye. They have teeth fused to their jawbone that won't let go if they bite. Incredibly slow growing and metabolizing, capable of not eating for 6 months and not breathing for over an hour. This may be the secret as to how they have survived such a long time when other dinosaurs died out and the very land we are stood on was beneath the sea. Day 9 and 10 are spent at the second wilderness lodge in Arthur's Pass. The family farm has been turned into a lodge as impressive as the first, with an emphasis on allowing the forest to re-establish on the property. You will have the opportunity to learn about how the plants have adapted in New Zealand to withstand giant browsing birds like the moa, as well as learning about New Zealand's native mistletoes, beech forest, and hopefully meet some more native birds up close, including the fantail, which is usually a guest favorite with its high energy acrobatics, looking for insects that we stir up walking through the forest. While staying on the farm, we also have a farm tour, learning about merino sheep and beef farming in New Zealand and seeing how the dogs are used to manage the livestock. The dogs are affectionate and photogenic, albeit disobedient, and the sheep aren't much better, especially the pet sheep that have been hand-reared by Jerry and Anne's granddaughters. Keep an eye out for Candy the lamb pushing her way through the fence. If you didn't bring a suitcase of merino wool with you to New Zealand, you will want to take one of them with you when you leave after hearing how merino wool is superior to cashmere and synthetic products. Day 10, we also look out for New Zealand's alpine parrot, the kea. One of 3 parrots, the others being the kaka and the kakapo. Kakapo are sadly highly endangered, with a recovering population now up to 250 birds. Kaka are also recovering well after nearly becoming functionally extinct, with female birds being killed on the nest by predators. Thankfully, they are recovering well with predator control. Kea number about 3,000 birds, and little is known how they are tracking. A long way from the 100,000 birds that used to have a government bounty on their heads. But these incredible birds are the cheekiest, liveliest animals you might meet. Considered not just the most intelligent bird, but one of the most intelligent animals in the world, about equivalent to a 4-year-old child. They use tools, solve puzzles, love to play, and have a streak of cunning and determination to steal away your lunch that has to be seen to be believed. As an example, they move road cones into the traffic to stop cars in the hope of stealing a snack. What is a group of kea called? A circus, of course. Now, a few more photos of some of the other birds we're looking out for. That's the New Zealand bellbird at the top left with a tomtit, the black and white one next to it. Down the bottom, these are bar-tailed godwits that have migrated down from North America. New Zealand's wood pigeon and pied stilts. And this is the fantail. Incredibly challenging to photograph because they never sit still. On day 11, we head to Christchurch, where we visit the beach and look out for some of the migratory birds, such as those godwits who have just finished their flight down from North America. We're looking out for waders, such as royal spoonbills, who John Oliver admitted might just be worthy of beating his crested grebe for New Zealand Bird of the Century. We'll look out for dotterels and gulls as we learn about the history of the South Island's biggest city and of Christchurch and the challenges with the major earthquakes that struck in 2011. And tonight we say our goodbyes at a home-hosted dinner with a local family, giving us a chance to reminisce together without the noise of a restaurant and hear firsthand how living through the earthquake has been. A little bit of information on the changes that have happened very recently for the visas, and most notably the international visitor levy is increasing on the 1st of October from 32 New Zealand dollars to 100 New Zealand dollars. That's about 60 US dollars, and you still also need to apply now for an NZ ETA. Applying at least 3 days before departure, and as part of that process, you pay the international visitor levy. But do give that a bit of time to process before you arrive. And please be very careful to refrain from bringing any fruit, meat, dairy products, including cheeses, plants, or similar goods into the country. Regulations are strictly enforced to protect our industry and ecology, and substantial fines are enforced. Please ensure that your footwear and outdoor equipment, such as hiking poles, are thoroughly checked for dirt or seeds. It is essential to clean them meticulously before departing from home. And if you are arriving early in Dunedin before our tour, and I highly encourage you to do that, to have some time to acclimate following your long flights. And it also gives time if there's any delays in your flights so that you don't miss the start of the tour. And so I've got a few suggestions of things to do in Dunedin, including the Founders Museum and Dunedin Museum. The railway station in Dunedin, pictured at the bottom left, is one of the most photographed buildings in the Southern Hemisphere. Baldwin Street is the steepest street in the world, and incidentally, I used to live on Baldwin Street when I was at university. Emerson's Brewery, Richard Emerson is a deaf brewer who's established a wonderful brand, and Speight's Brewery does a wonderful tour, and it's one of the oldest breweries in New Zealand. St. Mary's Church in the middle of town has beautiful stained glass windows featuring some of our native birds, so you can get some practice birding in before the start of the tour. There is also an eco sanctuary and birding cruises available in Dunedin if you arrive early. And Robert, I'll hand back to you if we've got time for some questions.
All right, thank you so much, Sam. Now, before I start in with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your GoToWebinar control panel. And if you're interested in traveling to New Zealand with Nat Hab, you can visit our website at nathab.com for trip details or call us at 800-543-8917 to speak with an adventure specialist. All right, so let's dive into some of these questions. So for the hike, that includes about the 100 stairs. Now, are the stairs on a sharp incline? Do they have railings, or is it all open?
Yeah, most of the stairs we'll climb, there will be railings. We also do carry hiking poles in the back of the van that you're welcome to use whenever you need. And I've got a fairly stable shoulder or arm to lean on as well. They're not overly steep, and depending on the group and what we're expecting to see, we may not go up and down all of those stairs on any given day. But it's great if you have that ability because it takes us down to the hides where we can look out for yellow-eyed penguin on the beach up a little bit closer.
Great, thank you. So you talked about a height that went up about 600 feet in elevation. Now, are we just going to go straight up, or are we going to take our time? And are we going to be looking for things along the way?
Yes, our guide who takes us, our local guide who takes us across to that island, he also runs out of breath, and so he likes to stop and look for birds and look at the plants that we see along the way and take in the view. So that he can catch his breath as well. We do try and get up there in a reasonable period of time, but we do appreciate that it is necessary to catch our breath along the way up there. There are some uneven sections on that walk as well. And again, we'll use the hiking poles and take our time. And because there's no predators in New Zealand we need to be aware of, if there's a couple of us that need to move a bit slower, we can go a little bit slower and catch up with the rest of the group when we reach the top.
Sounds good. Thank you, Sam. So, a couple of questions about snow. People want to know where you are that it's snowing, and could could snow prevent us from getting to see Milford Sound, for instance?
I'm in Queenstown, which is sort of the middle of the South Island. We had snow on the first day of our tour 2 seasons ago, and we had snow on the last day of our last tour last season. Today and yesterday, the road to Milford Sound was closed because of the snow. Um, it's not something I'm overly concerned with during the summer season, but there is always a possibility that it could happen. And if the weather is in this condition and it's looking unlikely to get down there, we may be able to massage the itinerary to make it work on a different day. Um, it's not something that's happened to us in the last few seasons either. So we also carry snow chains in the vehicle so that we can continue the itinerary despite a fair amount of weather, but they do close that road for avalanche risk, particularly during the winter.
Great. Thank you for addressing that. So, in our luggage weight restriction, does that include our camera equipment?
Yeah, in your bag that you're checking in, ideally with your camera equipment, that will be 30 pounds. But if you're going to carry your camera around your neck on the flight, that is fine and obviously gives you a bit of extra weight allowance. And I've just picked up a new 200 to 600 millimeter lens. And so, yeah, I'll probably be doing just that, sticking my camera with that big lens around my neck just to keep it out of the luggage weight.
So, you do recommend bringing a longer telephoto lens over 300 millimeters, for instance, for birds?
Uh, yes, if you've got one. Yeah, I bring my lens and I share all the photos that I managed to take. Almost all the photos you saw today were mine and almost all from Nat Hab tours. But yes, a telephoto lens is definitely one you want to have in the kit. For this, a lot of we're looking for birds in a lot of instances, either from the boat looking out or various spots around the land. Even when we're shooting the sheep on the farm, they can start quite far away from us. So a longer telephoto lens is definitely advantageous, as are your binoculars.
Are there any other types of lenses that you would recommend for us? DSLR, mirrorless, anything?
In terms of lenses, a nice wide lens or general lens is great in Milford Sound because you're capturing big landscapes. For me, because I'm an aurora enthusiast, I usually carry a really fast lens, a 1.4 or 2 aperture lens um, with a wide range, just in case I'm trying to shoot some photos of the night sky. If I've got a faster lens, then I don't need to worry as much about star trails, and I can keep my shutter speed nice and short with a tripod, or leaning it on a fence post or something like that. If we get an opportunity to look up at the stars.
Would you recommend bringing a tripod, especially if I wanted to take pictures of the stars or waterfalls?
Um, we don't have a lot of waterfall stops to be photo. We do see waterfalls when we're seeing them in Milford Sound. We're from a boat which is moving or potentially rocking, so those longer exposure shots aren't going to work from the boat of the waterfalls. Um, if you had a compact tripod, it could be useful. But to be honest, as much as I bring mine, I don't use it very often at all. So it would be one of the first things I would take out of the bag if I was running out of space.
Great, thanks for the advice. So, as we are driving around, are we going to have opportunity to stop for some landscape shots, for instance?
Yeah, we do stop for a few landscape shots as we go, and we definitely try and stop for bathroom stops at least every 2 hours as well. And we'll try and keep those stops as scenic as we can, or fold them into the itinerary with other activities.
Is there any chance of an aurora sighting?
There is a chance, and Jerry from the Moiraki Lodge is forever sharing photos that he's taken of the aurora from there. I do have the caveat that I haven't seen one on one of these tours. Now we're moving from place to place. Where with aurora, you're also dependent on the weather, and we're dependent on the solar activity. In saying that, the sun is going through a very active cycle at the moment, and during the equinox periods, spring and autumn, auroras are generally more visible. And so, as a former aurora guide, I used to work in Tromsø in Norway, not in New Zealand, looking for those. I am always very keen to see that and keeping an eagle eye out on the off chance we might catch it. Um, there is a chance, but it's an outside chance.
Great, thank you for that. So, we were told that not to bring hard-sided suitcases. Is this true? Does that make sense?
Um, you can have your main luggage can be a hard-sided suitcase, but for the airplane flight over to Stewart Island, you need to have a smaller, soft-sided bag to take across there.
Great, thank you. And are we going to have any water landings? Should we bring some water shoes for any wet landings?
There won't be any wet landings off the flights. Stepping on and off the boats is all from jetties, although it can be a big step up and down onto the boat. It might be sort of a foot up and down getting on and off those boats with a little bit of wave action as well. When we go looking for the penguins on the beach on the west coast, we have gumboots, or what you probably call them Wellingtons or galoshes, that we wear to go through those rivers. And generally, you won't need them if we are going to get our feet wet. The once or twice that it might happen through the season, we'll take our shoes and socks off to walk through a creek if it's necessary.
Great. Thank you for addressing these questions. But unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us.
Okay, well, I've got a little video from a short from a film, New Zealand film by director Taika Waititi, starring Sam Neill and a young actor Julian, and they're talking about how amazing it is up in the mountains. And this film is called Hunt for the Wilder People. and it's based on a book by New Zealand author Barry Crump called Wild Pork and Watercress. So all going well, I'll play that for you now. Or now.
Pretty majestical, eh?
I don't think that's a word.
Majestical, sure it is.
Nah, it's not real.
What would you know?
It's majestic.
Well, that doesn't sound very special. Majestical's way better.
So thank you very much for having me and listening to me this morning, and looking forward to welcoming many of you over to New Zealand this year. And I also had on my slide there, feel free to send through any future topics that you'd like to learn about New Zealand or our animals in one of these web series. Thanks, Robert.
Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Now, if you are interested in information on how you can travel with Nat Hab, give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including our registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.